here we are for Mella's Diner. Thank you guys all for being here and everyone in the chat. So tonight we have a pretty awesome panel. We have Bazed Lit Analyzer, BLA. Such an honor to have him on here. Thank you for joining us. We've got Matty from Digital Minefield. Thank you. We have Jerry from Exposing Powerful Lies. We've got Jason Scholl. He's a homie from the chats for years now. And last but not least, we have the real John Connor. He's like he's like the resident. He's a staple here, but always glad to have him.
I'm the waiter.
He's the waiter. Yeah, he's the waiter. Yeah. So, yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. This should be a lot of fun. Yvonne is saying there's a little feedback. Sorry about that. Hopefully we'll figure that out. But so yeah, today I really want to show some more art because that's what we did in the last panel. And the reason why I like showing art is because it's very accessible, you know? Like, you don't have to read a book, you don't have to watch a movie, you don't have to watch a series to get it. Anyone can see it, anyone can view it. And as I was looking around and I saw a bunch of stuff that I saw was very interesting, I realized that it all came from the same time period. It all came from the Romantic age, right? Which was like late 1700s, early 1800s. And it's all like wedged between the Enlightenment and the height of the French Revolution. So it's like it's a reaction to the Enlightenment, which is something that we can all, you know, identify with. Like we can all see something is that they got correct, you know, especially as Orthodox or Orthodox adjacent. We can see, you know, how they were reacting to the over-rationalism and the nihilism that was actually, you know, downstream from that. But it also gets a little demonic. It also gets a little, you know, crazy. And so that's the madness. And so we're going to take a look at some artists. We're going to take a look at some art. And hopefully we can all, you know, have something to say about it. But before we get into that, let's do a little round of introductions. And just as a little icebreaker type of thing, let's also, you know, share what's in your algorithm. Whether it's Instagram or YouTube, what is the beast showing you these days? So who wants to go first?
I can start.
I'm going to say BLA. Oh, you want to start, Matty?
No, okay. Go ahead.
All right, I'll start. Yeah, thanks for having me on here, Mella. Appreciate it. It's good to see everybody on here. All the homies. I'm Bazed Lit Analyzer over at YouTube. You want to know what's in my algorithm? All Hotler. It's all, the whole thing is Dolph Hotler nonstop. I mean, I got a couple of things with dogs and synthesizers. But other than that, it's pretty much all Hotler.
He's not joking. That's very believable.
Yeah. like nonstop. Some inspirational speakes. You know,
that's some art too. There's some great paintings too. You know, yeah. My algorithm is all lately been like tabletop RPGs, like Dungeons and Dragons style stuff. Been watching a lot of content about that. Just all the different games they got, and then 18th century videos like the Townsends. I don't know if you're familiar with that YouTube channel, but like it's this historian guy who like loves 1700s, and he does all these videos about the 18th century and food and stuff like that. So that's pretty much all the stuff that's popping up for me.
Awesome. How about
my
you,
algorithm?
Matty? Oh, John.
No, go ahead, Matt. Go ahead, Matty.
I'm not on YouTube. I don't watch a ton of YouTube, but probably 90% of my algorithm is bar rescue because I fell down into the bar rescue. I was gonna say rabbit hole. That's not the right term, but I am a John Taffer fan. If you know, as long as I'm alive, John Taffer will have a fan. And so
you overserved my daughter. You're overserving. You've been overserved.
The guy's a legend. And then occasionally I'll get I think that's pretty much it on YouTube. It's pretty much bar rescue. And then on Instagram, it's pandas and Gilmore Girls and things having like charts and graphs having to do with markets and the economy and consumer pricing index and those kinds of things. So yeah, that's pretty much all I get on Instagram. And then occasionally like some random grunge live videos from the from the 90s, like Veruca Salt and like Mudhoney and whoever. It's kind of interesting.
Awesome. How about you, Jason?
Yeah, so the only algorithm I really let run amok on me is Instagram, and it's virtually all just like absurd humor. I think that's its intention, and I do find a lot of humor in it, but it's always just like brain rots, shocking, weird, I don't know what I'm allowed to say here, but for example, that sausage in a jar meme I shared, that's a good example, without bringing any controversial topics to what the algorithm's showing me, but stuff like that.
Would you eat one of those for real?
No. I was actually telling Mella I sent that to Posh Redneck. I'm sure you guys know Posh, and and his reaction was, "But why?" I don't think he was very impressed.
I'm an active blocker, those stuff's pretty curated. I mean, first of all, I either block or I hit not interested in every single ad that ever comes across. And I also, anything recommended on YouTube that's not in my sphere, I go through and I look for a specific. This is very OCD. 1, 2, 3, 4. I go to specific numbers. So if it ends in a specific number, I'm not going to say what the number is, but if I end in a specific number, then I'll block it, and then I'll go through and I'll block that number of the videos above it. So I spend all my time blocking or hitting not interested on videos.
My Instagram is great, dude. My Instagram is all Orthodox, like the entire thing. And I didn't even try to do that, but like that's pretty much all I see. I do see occasional humor stuff, like Jason was saying, but it's pretty much all just Orthodox stuff.
Do you have like a gematria equation is that what you're describing, BLA, for your
man.
blocking? Is that what that is? Like
I'm a third generation dream psychic, so I just use whatever.
You just tell where the cyclosphere tells you, basically. Yeah?
That's right.
That's
right.
Yeah. I get you.
So what about you, John?
Well, so like a long time ago, I think it was like what's his face? Cyprian on the Royal Path made a suggestion. He was like, yeah, like if you want to spend less time on YouTube, because like during the fast, I always delete all my socials because like I'll just be doom scrolling the whole time unless I get rid of them. So the YouTube is the only one that I'll keep. And he was like, well, you should turn off your suggestion and clear your history because then they won't be able to suggest you anything, which is true. So I don't have anything that comes up on my feed except for like what I'm already subscribed to. So the only thing I have is just like the stuff I'm subscribed. So it's like Unsolved Mystery re-releases and those body cam videos. That's the biggest thing. But then for Instagram, it's like, can
I ask you something? Why do you watch those?
Well, like I realized that like a reason I like the body cam videos things is because I've always liked Unsolved Mysteries. I used to watch Unsolved Mysteries all the time, and then I stopped. I don't know, years ago I stopped watching it, but then I think it didn't click for me until like the last week or two. That's why I like those, because it's like straight up like, and it's also because like sometimes those cases where it's like super, especially like some of the messed up things, it's like I don't know if I necessarily like it, but I just, especially, considering the fact I've worked with people my whole adult life, I am interested in, when things go astray. It's interesting for me to look at that sort of stuff, especially because like there's a couple times where I've seen like videos where like someone like did a heinous act and then it was like they were in like a deteriorated mental state, and the reason why they said it is because they were trying to take revenge on God. I've seen a couple videos like, so it's like just like how they said it in Prisoners, just like how the lady at the end of Prisoners said this is all to take revenge on God. So it's like it was the same thing. So obviously that's not something I'm in support of, but I just find it interesting that like, yes, that isn't just a movie. People actually go to that level in real life. So I just think it's fascinating. It's definitely not.
I watch those too. I watch the body cam videos too.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then Instagram is like a combination. Instagram is like the feed always sends me like cooking vids, Orthodox stuff, and cats. That's like, especially the one where it's like it's the cats driving to different places, right? You know, it's like get to this different neighborhood of Boston. It's like this neighborhood, it's the cats, like, and then look at these different towns in New Hampshire. That's one of my favorite one. Obviously, it's the towns in New Hampshire. So it's like, look, it's this town in New Hampshire, this town in New Hampshire, this town. And it's all the cats. You know, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Where they have like the map, and then it's like them driving to different places. I love that. So,
Dude, this is tripping me out. This is the first time I've seen John's face. I've heard your voice for years. Yeah, we talk on the phone all the time. I got him. I got like endless recordings of him doing Trump, but I've never seen his face before. That's cool.
well, I hope it doesn't disappoint, frankly, Jerry. I hope that it was worth the wait. I hope it was.
And Jason, this is your first time on like a YouTube stream, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is the first time I've ever been on camera, probably in years. Even in my private life, I have like no pictures or videos of myself for a long time. So
that's the whole reason I agreed to this stream was because I heard Jason was going to be here. I'm like, oh shit, I gotta come.
Yeah.
It's funny because Jason, I've never seen Jason before, but Jason, you look exactly like I knew that you looked, which is a good thing. I knew exactly what you looked like when you came on here because I'm a dream psychic.
Psycho it's all good. You do not sound like how I thought you would sound because like I know I saw like your picture on Instagram, your profile picture is like that's you. So it's like I figured that was unless you just put a random picture of someone else there, which would be pretty fucking creepy. But like but like you put yourself up, like you do not sound. I thought your voice would be like way deeper. I thought you'd have like I don't know, some sort of like federal inmate voice thing going on.
Like a Dune voice.
Yeah.
I will say, because like Jason, I don't want to dox you. I know which region of the country you're from, but for some reason I expected you to sound like Jimmy Bauer. I don't know why. I just expected this like kind of deep Louisiana sort of voice, and I don't know why. But anyway, it's awesome to have you on here.
Yeah, this is cool, guys.
Yeah,
I always
I think
appreciate
it's going to be a little trend of having people do their little YouTube debut right here. So, because Punchy did it last time, so we'll see who's next. I'm hoping actually next time we'll get another half of the BLA PBR Street Gang on here. I'm hoping for Toledo. I'm hoping for KF. So, yeah, hopefully this is.
I'm ready.
So I wanted to ask, so BLA, a couple of weeks ago at the end of one of your streams, you were talking about what you're going to get into next. And you said you were going to get into William Blake. And it's a synchro because I was already planning on bringing him up today. So the first question I have is, does he kind of look like Matty a little bit there? What do you guys think? Just a little bit?
I can see it.
That is Matty. Yeah.
Dang, that's harsh. I mean,
no,
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
He's got drip, bro.
He's a seventh dimensional time portalist, and he's been hanging out in his trees in his backyard, communing with the angels. That's what Blake used to do.
Wait, who am I? I'm mixing him up. Not William. I'm thinking of somebody. I'm mixing him up with somebody else.
It's not harsh. You know, I've been learning about Blake, and my mind has really been changing about him, and that's why I really want to talk about him today. I think he's really interesting. So, have you guys seen this movie called The Dangerous Lives of Altar Boys?
No.
It has Jodie Foster. She plays a Catholic nun it's like a co-ed Catholic school. What's his name? I think it's Kieran Macaulay Culkin. Kieran Culkin, he's like the little brother of Macaulay Culkin. He plays like this kind of troubled, Catholic school boy. And there's Vincent D'Onofrio. He plays a pretty interesting portrayal of a Catholic priest. But anyway, so this boy, Kieran, he's reading one of William Blake's illuminated books. It's The Marriage of Heaven and Hell.
Yeah.
And the Jodie Foster character, the nun, she takes it away and she says, this is a very dangerous man. And she confiscates the book. And so I feel like from what I've seen, of William Blake, it seems like he's portrayed as this really like dangerous kind of Aleister Crowley type of character that's like unraveling this diabolical prophecy, like in Red Dragon and Manhunter, right? And let me show those paintings that he made. So I'm sure everyone's kind of familiar with these, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so just looking into it, I'm like, Okay, so he obviously kind of has his own mythology that he's drawing out from the Book of Revelations too. He has all kinds of very interesting. It seems very Gnostic to me.
It is.
And
It is. It's specifically Gnostic. Yeah, he was a Manichaean Gnostic.
Cringe.
absolutely, like
He was also heavily influenced by Emanuel Swedenborg. So
yes,
he
was
partook of Swedenborg's church, and I don't know if he ever met him, but like there was a Swedenborgian church in London that he frequented also.
That's good.
okay. So, well, the reason why I find him very interesting is because there's this guy. Is anyone familiar with this guy, Mark Vernon?
No.
No. Okay. Okay. So he does tons of talks and lectures on William Blake, and he's like a really big proponent of him. He really believes that William Blake, his view of the world is amazing. You know, it's beautiful, and he shows a lot of the paintings that he does. You know, biblical scenes. And look at this here. This is one of the plates that he does. It says, "Therefore God becomes as we are, that we may be as he is." And this is Athanasius, St. Athanasius. He says, "The Son of God became man so that we might become God." Correct?
Yep.
So doesn't that sound like theosis? Like he ascribes
Sure.
to this idea of theosis.
Sure. There's the thing is too is like as Orthodox, when I first became Orthodox, I kind of because I had never really looked into the church fathers at all. I have such like a Orthodox, like it's just my mind is associated when I think of the church fathers with Orthodoxy, but there are a lot of non-Orthodox Christians that do read the church fathers, and that it's like the my buddy was just hanging out with the Amish and posting it on Facebook, and they like brought him into this guy isn't Orthodox. They brought him into like their community basically in the church, and he was sending all these pictures of all the church fathers like books, and he's like, dude, the Amish read the church fathers. So it's not that surprising when you see people outside of the church that also are aware of like early church history, church father stuff.
Yeah, go ahead.
I did Mella. I did an analysis of Red Dragon and of the Thomas Harris book, and then talked about William Blake, and then I discussed William Blake and a couple other of the romantic early streams on Romanticism, and also in the stream on the picture of Dorian Gray. And then I'm going to do another one. There's a great book on William Blake called Fearful Symmetry by Northrop. And William Blake is a sort of nuanced view of William Blake. I mean, I've seen his engravings of the Book of Job in person. I haven't seen his Red Dragon because it's locked up at the Brooklyn Museum, just like in the movie Red Dragon.
Because they know that BLA will eat it, just like
That's
in
right.
the movie.
Yeah. Your son is changing. He's part of a great becoming. But William Blake is an important figure, mainly for literature, and the reason is because William Blake was seen as the godfather of the Romantic poets. There are 5 Romantic poets. It started with Coleridge and Wordsworth, who published lyrical ballads in 1798, and the Romantic movement goes until 1837. It's a very brief movement, and it's seen as a reactionary movement against the neoclassical Enlightenment, and it's a precursor to the Victorian era. And Byron, Shelley, and Keats came after this, but they all owed a debt to William Blake, who was much older than them. But Blake was an interesting cat. He was unlike a lot of the other guys. He was a fairly middle class, if you can call it that, a middle class Englishman, and it was fairly conventional. But then he really became a sort of, everyone looked on him as a mystic, and his most famous books, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, and then Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience. I've been teaching that book for about 18 years. And it is a dualistic Gnostic view of the world. And this is especially seductive to people who are younger people, younger men, especially, who are getting into literature. And it makes sense in many ways. But where he goes astray in his theology would be that he begins to be heavily influenced by the French Revolution and by democracy and by the democratization of, a separation of church and state. And then a sort of, he represents a kind of backlash against what he saw as the tyranny of the English monarchy. And he goes into specific and overt Gnosticism. Really, when he is discussing one of the engravings you just showed was an engraving of Paradise Lost, and this is Lucifer, before the fall, right there in his original glory. So Lucifer and the great red dragon, and then turning into Satan represents to a person like Blake, who sees literature in a Miltonian sense as a breaking through to the other side through the rebellion of Satan as a kind of liberating figure. And that's it's this straight up Gnosticism. But he melds this. Jack Kerouac did something similar, which is that a lot of times people who are, and we all can sort of, I'm sure, relate to this in a way, like when you're younger and people are searching for something deeper in their lives, it's especially seductive to be brought into something where you start to incorporate various religions. So with Jack Kerouac, it was like incorporating Buddhism into a kind of his own kind of Christian theology, mixed with his sort of French Canadian Catholicism. And with William Blake, it was a kind of deep Anglicanism mixed with a kind of pre-Catholic vision of England as Albion, mixed with this kind of liberating Manichaean Gnosticism. And so his poems are wonderful. They are especially important for literature. But in terms of following his sort of theological spirit, I mean, he's a guy, and he was known as an eccentric mystic. And like I said at the beginning, I mean, he really was known for, sort of as a kind of proto Aleister Crowley figure who would, exist naked and walk around the environs and be up in the tree. And his wife was famous for saying, "Oh, where's Blake?" He'd have a person call on him at home, and she would say, "Well, he's in the backyard in the tree, communing with the angels. So you'll have to get him down from there." He's kind of a crazy kook character, but I know the topic is genius and madness, and Blake sort of really walks that line. And I really like many aspects of Blake. I like his originality in terms of his verse, the way that he sort of eats words, and he has something that is completely unlike anything in literature. He really takes a lot from Milton and from Shakespeare, but in terms of his theological spirit, I think that he's a guy out on the fringes, who sort of definitely crosses over into heresy at times. And you can see that also. He's got a great engraving of of God setting the planets in motion, but it's clearly it's a Masonic, almost Kabbalistic painting with the Masonic G, with the son of man or Adam, looking out onto the world. There he is again with Newton and the setting the compass, and trying to measure the spheres of the universe. But his engravings are really beautiful, and he was known mostly as an engraver, even though he was a writer. But he gives us a lot of the things that we still use in our everyday common parlance.
Yeah, I was learning that he was a very DIY kind of guy, which I really like, and he had a very interesting way of doing engraving. It was his own unique way of doing it, but even he himself said that it was like an infernal method, because he had a different kind of way of doing it where the acid would eat away at the copper, and what was left over is the revelation or something. So he did have go ahead.
Yeah, well, that's part of the engraving process, and by the infernal method, he also means, I mean, if you look at the poem "The Tiger," which is the darker side to the poem "The Lamb" is the most famous, probably the most famous English poem. It's the #1 memorized poem by English school children, and it's a Christian poem. It's about the Paschal Lamb. It's about the Lamb of God. It's about Christ. But then the other side is about creation arising out of the sort of infernal plane. And he makes a good point in the poem, which is that how can he who made the lamb make thee? Which means that how can you look at the world? Meaning how are your senses able to get a handle on this? The fact that when you look at the world from a childlike eye, how is it possible through the beauty of creation that we live in a world where the same God who made the lamb made the tiger, which is the complete opposite? It's made with this sort of, even the camouflage of the tiger is described in the poem is like the stars throwing down their spears. It's deadly terror's clasp. It's all sort of death energy. And how is that possible? And that's him reconciling it in the poem. Well, we know how it's possible, but it's, that's how he tries to reconcile it in the poem. And his infernal energy here, I think, also speaks to, again, the topic of this stream. Not to monopolize here, I'm going to stop after this, but it's like, if
Nobody minds. BLA.
If you look at the difference between genius and madness, I think this is one of the all-consuming things that I have a particular notion for talent, genius, and the divine, like sort of 3 layers of creation and art. And I think that a person who is consumed with genius often does that to the detriment of their own soul. There's something in this C.S. Lewis book that I'm reading right now, a biography of him, where it talks about how at one point C.S. Lewis was debating with Tolkien and with others about the notion about the notion of what words mean and what they signify. And the example that he gave when he was debating these 2 other people who come up with a complete theory of how education should be changed in the early 20th century is that, remember it becomes a sort of pseudo parable of Coleridge, who is on a hike in the Lake District, and these 2, tourists come and they see this waterfall, and the man stands there and says, "This is sublime," and the woman says, "Yes, it's quite pretty." And Coleridge's notion of that, which C.S. Lewis agrees with, is that no, the man was right and the woman was wrong, even though it's just a thing that they said, that the words have meaning, and that the sublime is a particularly potent word that sort of symbolizes and encapsulates everything the Romantic poets did. It's the notion of the sublime is that it becomes almost Platonic. It's a Neoplatonic sort of world where this, and Blake was a proponent of this, that when you're looking at the waterfall is not just pretty. This particular waterfall on this particular day is a glimpse of a fragment of the way that the waterfall occurs in the world of forms, which to Blake is heaven. So that the waterfall in heaven is waterfallness. It's the ultimate waterfall, and we get a glimpse of that through the dark veil, or through a scanner, through the glass darkly. We see a little glimpse of this because we're in the fallen world. That sort of encapsulates what Blake was about.
Yeah,
I have a question about. Oh, sorry. Thanks, Mella. I have a question for you, BLA, because you have many times throughout your streams talked about apotheosis, right? And to me, I understand that, like, and I'm glad actually Mella brought up that point, or that you brought up that point, Mella, about like him talking about theosis. It was definitely surprising for me to hear that. But would you say that it seems like he's more likely talking about something we would see as apotheosis and not theosis itself?
I don't know. I think everything's sort of wrapped up in one with Blake. I think that the thing with Blake as a poet versus a philosopher, he's not a philosopher. His poems are philosophical, but he's not a philosopher. And I think that with a poet like Blake, the thing that happens is that the feeling, and this is again, C.S. Lewis talked about this, that the feeling and the notion and the emotion of such overwhelms anything rational or anything else. And so that every sort of philosophical or spiritual notion sort of gets wrapped into one and becomes overwhelms him, where he has to translate that into a poem or into an engraving, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. Do you know what the origins of Albion are and where he came up with that idea? And because it is almost like I don't know. I watched the documentary about William Blake. There was one that actually has Ginsberg in it, where he performs. He has a pump organ and he performs the Tiger. as if it's like a lunic sort of song, basically.
Yeah, tiger,
So
tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. What immortal hand or eye could frame that fearful symmetry?
exactly.
Ginsberg would be the person to do that back in the day, because Ginsberg and the way that Ginsberg wrote poems was. So in philosophy, you know, every philosopher sort of builds on the previous person.
Yeah.
Right. So Kant is kind of building on Descartes and so forth, you know, and Aristotle's building on Plato. Poets also do this, but in a sort of reactionary way, where they build and then they break it apart. And Ginsberg's inspiration was Blake. It was twofold. It was like Blake and Walt Whitman, and those two are kind of incongruous in many ways, even though they sort of overlap in the 19th century and they overlap in spirit. But the American Romantic era is different from the English Romantic era in almost every way, and it becomes much more freeform with Walt Whitman. But Ginsberg would be the guy to do that. I forget what you said at the beginning. Sorry.
No, I was just saying. I was talking about. Well, I was curious
Albion.
Albion, yeah, because
Yeah.
Albion sounds like it's a retelling of, like, I don't know, Asgard or some other, like, of the old pagan myths, basically. Because I've never heard in the modern era until, like, people start, like, sort of recreating, like, so people start recreating, like, old pagan myths. That sort of thing brought up. So it's very unique to Blake, I think, in some sense, you know.
Yeah. And Christ is King right there says Albion is the original name of England. It means white land. Yeah. Albion really is a proto-British vision of England, especially before the Anglo-Saxons arrived, before the Angles, the Saxons, and the Danes, and even prior to the Romans. So this is where you get, like, remember at the Queen's funeral, you get the druid coming out with the wand. That's a remnant of what Albion is. And this ties in with the early Arthurian legends, because although the Arthurian legends are about Albion, they're typically written by, and you know, Mallory is much later, but they're typically written by people on the continent. So the vision of England as a part of the continent of Europe, but separate, is like an Avalon. It's a further place. It's on the other side of the Misty Sea. And this comes from a time in the Druidical sort of prehistorical time of pre-England and pre-Britannia, when it was ruled by Druids and Celts and the High Kings. So it's just a notion of what's past will come again. This is why Arthur, when he goes off in the boat with Vivian, the Lady of the Lake, they take him to Avalon, but he's not dead. And there are all these legends about he's going to come back or he'll be resurrected from how he was. And this is the sort of vision of the past is prologue for England.
Is there an actual that is an act? There's a legend about him resurrecting as he was, like in the end of the
well, he never comes back, but the end of it is always with Arthur being boated off with the Lady of the Lake, whose name is Vivian.
Gotcha.
And he's defeated. He's defeated. In a way, he's defeated death, because his son is Mordred through Morgan Le Fay, and it's a kind of that's how the Grail quest sort of gets symbolized. Arthur is the embodiment of the monarchical spirit of England, which sort of translates into continental Europe, but the Grail quest is a whole other thing. I think that the Grail quest is a quest for the Eucharist. The Grail is the Eucharist, and that's why only in all I've got all of the Arthurian books, all of the translations, all of them, and the one person who achieves the Grail. Sometimes it's Percival, sometimes it's Lancelot, but there's always a slight fault. There's a fault in the quest. But the one person who achieves the Grail, with bar none, is Galahad, and Galahad is the son of Lancelot, and Galahad is the sinless knight. He's the stainless knight. He basically does no wrong, and so he achieves perfection and purity by being served the Grail. And Arthur doesn't get it. But Arthur is seen as the embodiment of the realm, who sends the knight errant out to get the Grail.
Mm. Nice.
Interesting. Well, just to get back to Blake, I feel like, so if we look at this painting, this guy, Mark Vernon, And this is why I think some of William Blake's critiques on, the world as he saw it at the time were correct and awesome, because he portrays Newton as, he's doing some kind of calculation. He's really focused right there. But he's sitting on this really beautiful, like organic, like mossy looking rock, and he's just kind of missing the forest for the trees, Do you guys see that, or do you agree with that? Especially BLA, I wonder. Do you think that's correct interpretation?
I'll pass it on to the others. I see this as he is portrayed as a kind of titan, and Blake often portrays, monolithic figures in this sort of way. But yeah, I like what you said about missing the forest for the trees. What do you guys think?
I think I think he is kind of like a titan sort of figure. I would agree with that. I think it's interesting that, and I mean, it's the way it's painted, but it's almost because the way he fits in so perfectly with where he's sitting, it's almost as if he's a part of the landscape, but he's totally detached from it, right? Yeah. So it's sort of like he's supposed to be there. It's almost as if he's attached to the landscape, but he seems to be. And I don't know that much about Newton, so I don't know what his thoughts on nature and everything were. But it seems as if he has no interest in nature, the natural world, and he's sort of I don't know, maybe transcended any of that and is purely like on operating on an intellectual level.
Newton was a proto-alchemist, actually. I mean, Francis Bacon was also the both of them did in some sense, Matty. That's interesting you brought that up, because the both of them did, in some sense, not have any actual interest in nature as it was, and didn't necessarily have interest in like God's creation and like how that's a reflection of the divine image or of the logos or anything. I mean, their primary motive was, and you can kind of see that in science to this day, it's like, how do we manipulate the environment to give us what we want, right? That's the whole point of, getting gold out of lead or whatever, the mercurial sort of principle that is the basis of all alchemy, that became the basis of all science. And I think I think what you guys said is good about him being a titan figure, because I mean, that also, I guess, makes him a Chronos figure in some sense,
we're gonna look at that.
right, exactly. Yeah. So but about your the initial question that you posed, Mella, I mean, that's definitely true. I mean, I think that like if he's displaying it as such, that was certainly like one of the, I mean, I don't know, Hanley, you might be able to answer this a little bit better, but to my understanding, the whole point of the Romantic period was exactly that, was a reaction against what's called, at least this is the classical view of it, it's a reaction against the Enlightenment, basically. This is philosophically speaking, like you see, Kant and and before Kant, Descartes, but then also David Hume, sort of as like the driving force of philosophy in Europe up until that point. And starting in the Romantic era, you see the birth of existentialism with Soren Kierkegaard, and you also see Schopenhauer and subjectivism and nihilism start to creep in, which is essentially to say that's like, well, we reject everything, basically. Not only are we rejecting reason itself, we're also rejecting even all systems of morality and all systems of metaphysics, basically. So you see it as like essentially a total reaction against the whole philosophical project in some sense.
Well, the Romantic movement, like you said, is a reaction against the Enlightenment and a reaction against strict rationalism. And the best way to symbolize this, the best way to think of it in literature, would be the difference between the poems of Alexander Pope and the poems of, we'll say, Coleridge. So Coleridge's poems have a unique rhyme scheme, and they are like, for instance, Kubla Khan. Kubla Khan has a much darker atmosphere. It's about a place that might not exist. There seems to be some sort of occult or esoteric elements, but Lyrical Ballads by Wordsworth and Coleridge is really about walking. It's about going outside, and this is the other way to symbolize it, which is that when you go to like Washington D.C. or Richmond, and you look at buildings designed by Thomas Jefferson, or you look at government buildings, and they have columns, Doric or Corinthian, they have columns. There's a strictness according to the architecture, and that's sort of emblematic in the Alexander Pope poems, which is like rhymed lines of iambic pentameter. You call that heroic couplets, which means that every two lines rhyme. So there's a strictness, there's order in the world, and then you break that apart, and you have you have romanticism, which is that there's still a structure and there's still a rhyme scheme, but now people are out in the cathedral of nature. And it's also important to remember that the neoclassical era is about the height of classical Greece and Rome, and romanticism also has the word Roman in it. And real romanticism is Romanesque. So Byron basically said that the way to think of the neoclassical era is to look at a Greek temple or a Roman temple, and the Romantic movement looks at those things in decay. So there's still a beauty to it. You can see what once was, but it's not at the height of it. And there's another beauty that comes out of it. And that you see that in this painting right here. We see sort of the hewn, character almost coming out of a rock, almost Promethean. There's splotches of color, but there's darkness in the background. He has the curly hair of like a Robert Herrick or a typical romantic figure. And he's also he's nude in profile, and we see the beauty of human creation, but he seems to have, this is post fall, so he has a veil, behind him, and it looks like he's unrolling a scroll, like knowledge that was there that we didn't know about, that he has to tap into and to measure here with his compass.
That's interesting. Another reason why I think he's kind of like, he gets stuff right, like he's really based, is because I guess he was having a conversation with someone, and he was like, what do you see when you see the sun rising? Don't you see like a golden disc? Like everyone would say that, right? Like, oh, I see a golden disc rising up. And he was like, no, what I see is I see a host of angels saying, holy, 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 to the Lord. And it's like, wow, he's like, he has that right. Like he has this spiritual eye, for everything. And that's why I think he's awesome. And he also, I guess in one of his poems, he also said, the deists, right? The deists who believe. Can someone give me a definition of deist, just for the sake of the chat? Or,
Deism is what Thomas Jefferson believed, which is like the clockmaker God, that God sets the world in motion, but then has hands off and lets it run. I'm sure Jerry and Jason can also elaborate on that. And also, Jerry, I'm interested in what you have to say also about, we have a guy who's a mystic, and he's mystical, but he's left to his own devices, and there seems to be no order in terms of his religious evocation. What do you think?
Are we talking about Blake? Is that the guy you're referring to? Okay, because admittedly, I'm not like I never got super into Blake. I have Songs of Innocence, and that's the only work of his, and it's got pretty pictures. I don't think anybody wants to hear me give any art analysis. Like, it's a really pretty picture, dude. It looks cool, man. It's got some nice rocks and trees in there. And as for whether or not Blake's cool, I'm obviously like, I'm Orthodox. I think if he's a Gnostic, like that's super gay, and I wouldn't sing his praises too much personally, because it's just like, but just like anybody, I'm sure he gets stuff right all the time and stuff. So, yeah, I don't really have anything to add. I chime in if I got anything to add, but I'm just learning, listening to BLA, and I like looking at these pictures, and it's cool. But as for Blake, like, I don't have a bunch of commentary on that.
I just think it's interesting because, like, I would usually look at this, and I already told John Connor when I first started looking at Blake, I was like, I don't like this guy. Like, he must be some kind of Gnostic. But then I started learning more, and I was like, wow, he's really saying a lot of true things, and I feel like it's pretty relevant today. And that's why I wanted to talk about him. But this guy, Mark,
and you can appreciate people without them. Obviously, like, you got to separate art from artist, and just because somebody's wrong, at the end of the day, the big picture doesn't mean there's nothing to be gained. So I didn't mean to sound like that.
No, don't worry about it. I wasn't trying to insinuate that or anything. But I just thought it was interesting because this guy, Mark Vernon, said that he had a connection to the Eastern Orthodox Church through his mother, and that in London, where he was, right down the street was an Orthodox church. And he said there was absolutely, like, no doubt that he had some kind of connection to the Orthodox Church. So I just thought that was interesting. So maybe he didn't have the praxis. He got a lot of things wrong, but I feel like he got a lot of things right. And so that's why I think he's an interesting artist to look at. these
Hey,
days.
Mella.
Real. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah. So Mella, go back to the Newton image. I want to share a couple of thoughts that I have on it, just purely visually.
Yeah.
Like if I came to this image with like no background knowledge of who made it or any themes that knowing who made it might be trying to convey in it, I see a dark realm, an entropic realm, right? Like this is clearly a human who's, I mean, look at the position of his body. He's like squished downward. And yeah, it's because he's working on the ground, but which is another metaphor for the entropic, but he's nude and his body is like this. The musculature is what I like about Blake because it's almost not accurate, right? It's sort of like textured and and the bodies look like they're enduring pressure of entropy at all times and the muscles are resisting that. And it's like also how he's sitting on this rock, you know, if you notice where he's actually sitting, it almost has the shape of like a toilet, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that's another thing that kind of points to this. And that's another thing I noticed that's kind of like pointing to this entropic realm where we're down here in the flesh. We have to eat. We have to defecate. We have to, when you sit on the toilet, it's cold to your flesh, which is tender, and the porcelain is hard. And it's like this contrast, right? And
Wow, that's interesting.
yeah. And another funny thing is like, okay, so if this is sort of a symbolic toilet, right? And I'm not trying to like, degrade our analysis here, but it's like when man is on the toilet, that's when he has a lot of thoughts. That's when he's thinking, he's just that. It's like an old trope, right? So to me, these themes visually are sort of embedded in this image, in my opinion, and I just found that very interesting, And I think that perspective I just shared is kind of something that, a lot of people. I don't hear a lot of people analyzing art that way, where they just approach it purely visually. What are the associations I can make from it visually? We always try to educate ourselves about who made it, their beliefs, and this and that, and then that sort of pre-limits us to see it a certain way, if that makes sense, or comparing it to other works and things like that. So coming at it fresh, like if I was like a toddler and my mom brought me to the art gallery and I saw this, that's exactly what I would have thought. What I just shared,
No, that's a great way of thinking about
Rodin.
it. You're kind of getting out of that box, like you're saying, getting away from your assumptions. That's good.
Compare that to Rodin's The Thinker, which is literally, a guy on a toilet. Which also, by the way,
wait, you mean that giant monster that fought Godzilla? I love Rodin, dude.
I saw a Rodin exhibit, and people forget that's one of the. There's Caspar David Friedrich, Wander Above a Sea of Fog. That's the romantic painting right there. But The Thinker by Rodin has another Mandela effect, because you remember the thinker is not holding a fist, he's actually holding an open hand. We always think of him as holding a fist, but he's actually pointing back. He almost has the Michelangelo like fingers, the relaxed fingers of Adam pointing back at himself, in a kind of proto work of modern art. But this is the romantic painting of all paintings.
My bookshelf, my bookstops are The Thinker, miniature statuettes of the Thinker.
So I see this painting everywhere, before I knew anything about anything, I've seen this painting, and it's really cool. I love a lot of his work, but a lot of it is dark, and the reason why I'm prone to see it that way now is because of Father Seraphim Rose's Orthodox Survival Course, where he talks about, this is like, it's the void of nature. It's like the abyss just opening up, and we're just these small things,
Can I talk about this painting for a second, and then I'm gonna hand it off to Matty. This is a German romantic poem. I keep saying poem, painting, and this really symbolizes the Byronic hero. This is Lord Byron, basically, and the reason for that is that, number one, the character is he's usually depicted as, this looks more greenish, but he's usually wearing dark clothes, like he's a the Byronic hero is the kind of Satan of Paradise Lost, which is Satan looking out on the abyss. And here we have a guy who's at the top of the crags, just where Satan is found at the beginning of Paradise Lost, in adamantine chains and penal fire, except here he's walking in what kind of looks like the Lake District. But the important thing about this painting is that we see the abyss below him. We see the sea of fog. We see what looks like a Vesuvian crag in the or promontory in the background, but we also don't see his face. We're looking at his perspective, but we're also looking at the back of him. So we see the red, fiery, flaming hair, which symbolizes the kind of the intellect and the emotions meeting in the skull where he's going to create something. We see his walking stick and we see him looking out, but we never see his face, which is unusual for a painting.
Yeah, I think the perspective, I agree with that. The perspective on this one is really interesting. There's like one other painting, I don't know the name, it's a more recent one, but like my grandmother has hanging up in her house. It's just kind of similar painting where it's like a guy and a young kid like looking out at the sea. I don't know the name of it, but so I always appreciate that that perspective. And I hadn't really thought about like he is it is a sort of Byronic type of figure, which I'm a Lord Byron fan, so I hadn't considered that before. But one other thing I did want to say, I realized earlier I don't know why I was mixing up William Blake with Percy Shelley. So when you were like, oh, like it looks like Eddie, I was like, oh no, don't tell me I look like Percy Shelley. But I don't know why I was mixing those two up. So anyway,
I mean, that's not a bad mix up. Yeah, that's not a bad mix up. I mean, they were similar, and Shelley was a Blakean, so.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Let's see what else
Shelley,
I have here. Oh, go ahead.
Shelley was even more of a overt Satanist than Blake was. Shelley drowned also in off the coast of Rome. You can go to the Keats Shelley house in Rome, which I do on occasion when I holiday. That looks like Tintern Abbey, that last one. It looks like some sort of Dutch painting because the figures are always small, but that's another romantic type of painting because we see the ruins of an abbey, which looks like Tintern Abbey.
These are all right now from this guy.
Caspar David Friedrich.
That very, very fierce looking dude. Fierce looking German guy. Yeah,
that's
I love these though.
Hairstyle.
I think they're really cool. And this is one that is always quoted by Sadelmeyer. He's like this art historian that Father Seraphim Rose brings up in his Orthodox Survival Course. I tried to read some of his book. It's called Art in Crisis. It's very, very interesting. And yeah, they always bring this one up because it's this is the symbol of our salvation, but it's just so like, it's far away from us. It's like isolated, like he's not facing us. And yeah, it's just kind of sad, It's just sad.
That points out, Mella, the difference between a lot of the, strict Orthodox geniuses and their discussions of art and their interpretations of art and how it varies from for example, like when you were talking about Blake earlier, and you can sort of see that if you extend it to say like that there's an Orthodox church down the street in London, it looks like a guy who would have seen, for instance, the beauty of icons and sort of taken that and distorted it in his own secular or low vision into what becomes engraving art. So in other words, it's the difference between strict spiritual windows to heaven versus way lower down the tier, which is visions of an artist and what they interpret, how they interpret heaven. Does that make sense? It's like when you look at the Sistine Chapel. The Sistine Chapel is glorious, and it's one of the great things ever made by man, but it's made by a guy. Now he's painting for the Pope, but it's like the difference between having that as a painting and having that as a vision of creation versus actually having a service and worshiping in that place. And that's two different things. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean, but I just wonder why even paint these religious subjects if you're not gonna do it right. You know
Well,
what I mean?
Well,
no, because go ahead, John.
No, I was just gonna say. Well, that's the thing, though, Mel, is because it's like you got to remember, though. It's like by the time this guy made this, because he was painting in the Romantic era, right? You got to remember that's like that's one of the things that Father Seraphim Rose brought up, like in the Survival Course. It's like, by the time the Romantic era happens, it's like there's such a gulf between like our tradition of icons and what the West had made with religious art that it's like this is probably the closest this guy had. And like, yes, I mean, here's the thing. I think I see beauty in this piece, at least, I mean, to me, it's almost like, yeah, it's like it's on a hill far away, but at the same time, it's also like, well, at least something's in sight for this person. At least this person can actually see. At least there's light for this person, There's light for this person's perspective. It's almost as if it's like Joseph Arimathea's view from the tomb below,
Or maybe like somebody who's far from Christ, and it's sort of like it almost feels unattainable.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's like something. It's like, okay, here's your thing to work for. Maybe. Well, is that what you were saying, Jerry? Wait.
Yeah, just kind of like how like at times you can feel far from Christ and feel like I can't reach it.
Right.
So it's not like right there where you feel close. This feels like you're looking from over a hillock or like you're like on the other side of a mountain. Like it's far.
Yeah.
Right.
I see, Mel, and that's great points. I see that this is, again, there's a clear delineation between the artist, who is some guy at the end, we're all just people, but it's a guy who is showing his vision of what beauty is, or I think all art is concerned with God, whether it's, especially if it's specifically not concerned with God. It usually is even more so concerned. Like the banana taped to the wall is a statement of nothingness, but the nothingness only exists in the context and the atmosphere of somethingness. And so I think that looking at art, it's like if I write a poem, I'm just some guy writing, and this is my vision of how I perceive the heavenly, or how I perceive the world in a fallen world that I don't want it to be that way, but this is what I hope to achieve. And versus religious figures creating specific, if you want to call it art seems like a low word for, like, for instance, for decorating a church. It's not.
Well, we don't really call it art. It's not art.
art.
In the church, icons aren't considered, like art.
Right.
That's
different. Above. That's a different universe than a guy, painting.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And then also two things. So one, like what you were saying about the banana, like the whole postmodernism, as you're saying, like it is only nothingness as in relation to like reality, to the truth. Mm-hmm. Postmodernism as like a war against truth, like the like Reddit level atheist, like everything's meaningless, bro. It's like, but you're in reality where things have meaning, and so I see that kind of postmodernism as itself like a guy, I guess, sort of like whining about a world he doesn't understand. And then to Mella's thing about why make religious art if you're not going to do it like well or right. But how many of us like have met people in life and like schizos are always like super into mysticism or religion, right? Like the most like off the wall people are always like, they got notebooks full of like the angel numbers, and they're convinced the angels are talking to them or whatever. So I would think that was common, right? Like a bunch of people with like doodles of Jesus or something in their sketchbook.
Yeah.
Meth heads predate methamphetamine by a long time,
Yeah.
That's a good quote.
Are you guys familiar with Henry Fuseli?
I know the noodle, Fuseli. I love that pasta.
Fuseli.
Yeah,
Fuseli.
it's
I
good
don't
noodle.
know. So you guys know this.
The Incubus.
So apparently this painting, when it came out, it made Fuseli very popular. This was very much in vogue when it came out. And this guy, Sadelmeyer, who I mentioned already, he says that occultism was highly fashionable at the time. fashionable, sorry. And he says, it was as though a door has opened in man, a door leading down into the world of the subhuman, the world which threatens those with madness who have seen too much of it. And to me, and also, by the way, this painting, it was actually a print, right? Not the actual painting, but a print of this was hanging in Sigmund Freud's waiting room in his, psych office. And to me, this painting is like, it's just saying like the nightmare is real, guys. Like,
Yeah, it's my sleep paralysis demon. That's really cool. I got the same one as Freud.
Yeah. And this
you know what's weird about that too is that like, so I was talking to my priest about like not necessarily sleep paralysis, but like about like, demonic stuff and things like that. And he was like, if you ever, it's like, Jerry, I know you have a cat. Do you got, and BLA, I don't think you have a cat, but Mella, do you have a cat? And Matty
I
and
did.
The cats keep away the demons, man.
No, I used to have a lot of cats, but no more cats.
Yeah. Okay. And then Matty?
You have 7 cats, right, John?
I have 6.
Oh,
I have
6
6 cats.
Okay.
Yeah, I have 6 cats. And so the thing that my priest was telling me is just like, so like, first of all, in Russia, when someone because he's from Minsk, so like when someone builds a new house, when they make all the rooms and stuff, they don't even they don't decide where the bed's going to go until the cat goes in there and spends like a day in there. And wherever the cat ends up laying and stays there, that's where they put the bed. Because they know where the energy is. But the thing that he said, he was just like...
That's way cooler than feng shui, dude.
They call it fang shui.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
But the thing... So he said that's like, if they ever lay on a spot with you, like, that's like their way of like sucking the bad energy out of you, basically. If they have a particular spot, especially like if they all of a sudden go to a different spot that they don't usually go to, like if they always sit on your right leg and then all of a sudden they go to your left leg, or they go to your arm for some reason, they go on your shoulder, they're trying to get something away from you, basically.
My cat's just always bugging me to get the laser pointer out, dude. It throws a freaking temper tantrum every day for me to get the laser pointer out. It's addictive.
Oh, maybe there's something in the laser pointer.
No, I think it's just a freaking goofball.
That could also be it too, yeah.
Well, one thing that guy Sadelmeyer points out is that Henry Fuseli's paintings it's all nocturnal. Everything is happening at night. And so I can't remember exactly what this is, but he starts painting a lot of witchcraft stuff. And he also paints a lot of scenes from Shakespeare. So this is from Macbeth.
That's Macbeth, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Is this a dagger which I see before me? Handle and dudgeon pointed towards it, yeah.
You know what? That Polanski film, that scene with the dagger, the whatever, like, kind of CGI they had at the time was actually so cool. I thought
it is good.
The coolest scene. I love that movie. If any of you guys haven't seen it, you guys have to watch
Art thou not fatal vision, a dagger of the mind?
I believe that's the one they showed us in high school, is the Polanski one.
Yeah.
Really?
Which movie?
That was the first.
Oh,
that's
Macbeth.
The first,
okay.
That's the first stream I ever did on the channel. That
I remember
movie was the first movie that Polanski made after the Tate LaBianca shenanigans. And
man, throwback to that, dude. Everybody in the audience, go watch that, dude. See BLA's humble beginnings, man. That's crazy. Crazy to see how far you've come, dude. We're all so proud.
Those are the Weird Sisters. Weird, WYRD, the Weird Sisters, the Fate Sisters, the 3 witches. And that is now in every depiction, the scenes in by the way, Macbeth was the reason it's so potent and the reason it's kind of a cursed play is because of, first of all, Shakespeare wrote it for King James, who wrote Demonology. He wrote the book Demonology in 1547. King James would have been happier just being an academic than being King James VI of Scotland and the first of England. But also because the spells in the Witches' Sabbath, apparently, I've read a lot on this, and there's no way to verify it, but apparently Shakespeare, through folklore and through connections in John Dee Renaissance England, got the specific spells in the play. They were real spells. It's a real spell.
That's crazy. That's crazy, man.
This appears very Goya-esque. I don't know if you guys have ever, Goya.
I'm going to show him stuff later.
Yeah.
I know the beans. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll stop.
I was going to say they do remind me of Goya, too, BLA. They has like a kind of like that sort of like that ghastly sort of, because Goya stuff is very like ghastly, and that's what this looks like. It's like very like it means it's gas. It means it gives me gas. That's what that means. Yeah.
That last painting you just showed with Macbeth standing there on the right looks like, who did that painting? Satan commanding his legions. That Rockefeller. Remember Rockefeller and Marinka Abramovich posed in front of that picture at the party? It's a black painting called Satan commanding his legions. I don't know if you can find that, but it's the same type of physiognomy as Macbeth has right there, going to meet the three weird sisters.
Let me see.
Weird sisters, more like the weird sisters. They're like,
they're weird. Yeah, no, that's where the word weird comes from.
Oh wait, really? I thought you were saying the weir, like WEIR.
No, weird.
WYRD, isn't it? WYRD or something like that.
The word weird is an Anglo-Saxon word that comes from this.
Yeah, Shakespeare created a bunch of words, didn't he?
Yeah. He creates one. He creates a bunch. He's the one who coined the word punk.
Yeah, everything I know about Shakespeare I learned from BLA.
Are you talking about this one?
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, and do you know what this one is on the right? Right here? Do you see it? Sorry, I'm new to StreamYard, so hopefully. Did anything change here?
Is it the one where it's the lady writing down something with the guy on the throne? Is that the one you're talking about, Mel?
That's Milton. That's John.
Oh yeah, Milton. It is, because he's blind. Because his eyes, look at his eyes shining. Yeah, that's Milton dictating Paradise Lost. He was blind, like Homer.
But it's just such an like ice cold like depiction of him. You know, makes it like
I didn't know he was blind.
Spooky.
Yeah, he went blind, so he dictated the entire poem to his daughter.
Wow.
And that, I guess that's the muse sitting on his right.
His muse, yeah.
Yeah.
What else I have here? Oh, okay, yeah. This is from Paradise Lost. So yeah, okay. So we mentioned Goya. Let's talk about Goya. That guy's very interesting. Let's see. Here we go. There he is.
That looks like Matty.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought that was funny.
In a few years, in years down the line, that's going to be Matty.
No,
now it doesn't, but in the future it will.
You know, people have said that I look like Sandra Bullock. I never took offense to it. It's okay. Like, kind of do. It's fine.
No, I was joking because, like I said, I thought it was because I was mixing it up with Percy Shelley. So that's why I was just like, oh no, I don't want to look like Percy Shelley. But no, like William Blake, I'll take the William Blake comparison. That one, and maybe Goya in like 50 years.
No, hopefully not. What I like about Goya, well, okay, I'm just saying, like, he's very, very dark. He gets really, really dark towards his later life. But when he first kind of started as a court painter, he's kind of a troll. He's kind of a troll because he paints, and I wish I had more examples of this, but he paints these royal subjects as pretty freaking ugly. And somehow he gets away with it. And they look terrible. I'm so sorry. I wish I had a better view of some of the paintings he made of these, kings and princesses and stuff, but they look really ugly. And it's really not flattering at all. But somehow he gets away with it, and he's still the court painter in Spain, and he gets paid.
Is there a reason why their eyes are so small?
I don't know.
They're like beady.
They're squinting because of the light.
Yeah. Ah, right. Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, so let's see what else. Okay, are you familiar with this one? This one is a pretty famous engraving. This is when reason sleeps, nightmares come alive or something. I'm sorry, I'm butchering it, but it's something like that. And so it's a reaction to the Enlightenment, I believe, as far as I understand. And then he goes deaf. Like, he has these crazy chronic illnesses, and he goes deaf. And when he goes deaf, this is one of the first paintings that he makes. And
yeah, this is entitled Henley's Basement.
This is a yard with lunatics. And what else was I gonna say?
That's my job.
Oh, John, that's sad. Are you serious?
It's not real. No, it's not. I'm joking. It's not really.
I hope not. So
No,
this
it's
was at the height of the French Revolution, and he also painted. I don't think I included it here, but he painted this famous painting of, you know, a political prisoner getting shot by the French because they invaded Spain.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very shocking painting, but it's interesting because he paints very beautiful women. He paints the royal subjects, and then he starts painting these very, like, he paints all shades of reality and life in the world. He's like completely all over the place. I forget what this is, but it's some kind of, you know, crazy.
Look at the face on the banner.
Yeah, it's ugly. It's grotesque, you know.
Yeah.
And then
this I don't know if he was a direct influence, but because I don't know a ton about painters, but I could definitely see Geiger being influenced by Goya. I can definitely see some of the similar kind of themes and the way faces and things are depicted as kind of like grotesque and inhuman.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he was. I mean, Mella mentioned when Napoleon invaded Spain, his brother was put on the throne of Spain, and then I think it was like the Carlist Revolution, or it was one of the many revolutions within the Napoleonic invasions. But his mind obviously became fractured. Like you said, I think he went deaf, and then with all of this mass of death around you, even the way the guy in this picture has his hand. His fist on his rib cage, but it looks like skeletal fingers extending right there is pretty interesting. And I think that with all of the mass of death that was occurring around them, this is an important painter to study because he certainly is a precursor to, for instance, like Picasso and his Guernica. We see a direct influence with that. With, say what you will about Picasso, the Guernica painting, which is a purposefully ugly painting because it's supposed to be the minute that the Condor legions used the town of Guernica as a bombing site. I got that from my Hotler algorithm, but they had a different spin on it. No, he sees this explosive mass of death where faces become distorted and look, like. That's what cubism is. You're seeing faces from different angles, but in two dimensions. And I've been to the Goya Museum in Madrid, and what's amazing about these paintings, especially the ones with the Witches' Sabbath. There's one with the Witches' Sabbath, and then there's they're in a circle. Yeah, the one on the right is they're in a circle around Pan or a Baphomet, and then on the left is clearly the left painting is an influence on that movie the Witch, because they're rising. The witches are rising. They're hovering in their pride in their power, and they're even wearing the tall conical hats, but in reverse of Santa de la Semana, right, of Holy Week, how they have these rituals. And this is like a perversion of that with a conjurer down at the bottom in the midst of death, and you see the starving donkey behind him. And this is these are important paintings to study because even though they are demonic, they look demonic. I think what he's showing us is the ugliness of demonism. It's not something to look at and worship and see as emblematic. It's showing you that this is a real thing, and this is, at the very least, this is the spirit of this kind of mass death that occurs in these movements.
Yeah, I definitely don't get the feeling of it being romanticized at all with these.
That's the thing, man. That's the thing. Like, why are these paintings classified as romantic? Is it just because of the artist, because of the era? Like, what?
No.
What is it?
They're romantic again because, well, not again. They're romantic because they are Romanesque, meaning we're seeing the decay of corruption and the corruption of both like the physical structures, but this in the English and the European Romantic movement, it's the corruption of the soul. And so Romanticism moves from there are two sides of it, like with Blake. One is seeing the cathedral of nature, the beauty of God's creation, like an outdoor cathedral where we see the beauty that God has created, like we're walking into Narnia. And the other is the darkness of the human spirit when it becomes corrupted in a fallen world. And that is the sort of Byronic, dark aspect of Romanticism.
I just posted a quote from St. John of Damascus. The whole earth is a living icon of the face of God. That reminded me of that.
Yeah, and then he goes like pretty crazy. So you don't believe he went mad? I mean, he did, right?
I think, I mean, it looks like it with these paintings. It looks like his art consumes him. But wouldn't we all? I mean, living in the midst of this sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, this seems to be his vision of the way that the world has gone mad. It's not. In a way, it's like he's still sane, but the world is mad around him. Just look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the
Kronos eating his young Saturn.
Yeah. And John, you said something interesting when we were talking about Hieronymus Bosch in the last panel. You were like, this is like the point of no return for the West, right? And
well, in terms of the art, that's one of the things that Father Seraphim talked about, and I think that that's in the survival course, and I think that there's something to that, because it's like at this point, it's like, there was a point in which things could have maybe gone differently, but at this point now, it's like there's a, it went, the uncanny valley was reached, basically, I think, in that point. That was one of the major points of Father Seraphim Rose, and I think that's essentially what it is here, because it's like, this is, I mean, obviously, even to like, there's a few Instagram pages I follow about Byzantine art, and it's like, even there was, I get that this isn't religious art, this isn't like for churches specifically, but the problem is that the interface and the exchange between the culture and the religious art, and then what goes into churches and what gets informed by that, is a feedback loop that gets feeding into each other. And what emerges from the culture, I mean, that's sort of the overarching point that Father Seraphim made in the survival course, that this is a warning flag, like a signpost that's being lifted up to the culture at large, basically saying, like, this is what spiritually the state we're in, Henley, I'm sure you've probably said this on your stream before, but it's like, I think in many ways, the art that's produced by the culture is a reflection of the spiritual state of the culture itself, and what this is indicating to the people at large, basically, is that it's like, we are far from God, because this is what we're in communion with, I think that's essentially what the point of this is. And that's why I think Father Seraphim is right when it's like, when this era comes into play, the point of no return is reached, basically. And what you have now is either the option is basically simple. It's like either you go to the, well, actually, no, never mind. That's another point altogether. But that's essentially how I view it. So, yeah.
The reflection is interesting, because a lot of the great art is created by, and what in any era is like edgy or new art, something that's totally new, is separate from the weather vane. The weather vane is kind of what we were talking about with the reflection. It's like captures the thing that's already been created. But another way of looking at that is that if this is the reflection of the world, then it's reflecting the substance, the thing that's already there. So by the time that the reflection of it gets put down, it's already too late, like you were saying. I see somebody said something about Mercury, and you mentioned, mercurial aspects. I think what's interesting with this and with this painting of Saturn also is that one of my friends, we were talking about the way that he's a fucking expert on ancient movements of people post-flood, a bunch of words I don't know. But one of the things he said was that it's weird how different groups throughout history they'll recognize Hermes, or they'll recognize Mercury, and then they'll recognize Odin. And it seems like his idea is that these are all the same demons. They just occur according to different names of people. So for instance, like if Hermes, which gives us Hermeticism, it really comes from Hermes Trismegistus, but Hermes and Mercury, of the winged foot. Ezra Pound has a poem about gods of the winged foot. One of the things that he does in his speediness is also he's the god of writing. And he has the same attributes as Odin in the Norse pantheon. So his question was, how do we track the people throughout time moving post flood to these various places and getting in contact with demons and seeing these various demons, but having different names? But I think it's I guess suffice it to say that whenever masses, groups of people seem to be interested, not just interested, but to begin to worship and embody the spirit of sort of Hermeticism, the danger is that you are in contact with something demonic, and it goes from painting the reflection of what's in the world to actually creating what's in the world. And I don't know how to define those things and where the delineation occurs, but like, even look at these two paintings right here. The one on the left, right, Saturn eating his kid, is something that is archetypal throughout time. We see that's like the problem now in society, with the cost of children and the ball worship and all this stuff. And on the right, even on the painting on the right, it's grainier and more charcoaled and less clear. And so our vision of the world becomes more and more fogged over and blackened, even from the one on the left. So
yeah. Are you familiar with Jason Miranchuk?
No.
Really? Oh no. Okay. Well, he talks about the spirit of the vengeful son, but before the spirit of the vengeful son is, and I think John can talk about this, right? It's the
spirit of the devouring mother. Yeah.
Oh, devouring mother. Oh, okay.
Well, devouring mother. Then before that was the tyrannical father, basically. But those are, I mean, that's like, he argues that's like the overarching, like, mimetic sort of pattern that's in play in the cult, the major driving mimetic pattern of the culture at large. However, that being said, though, it's like there's elements of those things that are, I mean, I guess that's sort of the Jungian perspective on it, is that there's elements of that are play out in various art forms in various times, and that are present in every culture at every moment to lesser or greater degrees, basically, and certainly the consuming, like you said, Henley, that sort of archetypal force of the father that consumes his own children is present in every culture in some way, shape, or form. It is. But I guess that's sort of the thing that Miranchuk, the point that he makes is that it's like that's the mimetic principle of the culture at large, basically. That's the driving force of things, basically. The spirit of the age, the zeitgeist.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to know what Jason thinks, because Jason's the artist here. And so, Jason, like, can I ask a question, Mella? I'm sorry. Is that?
Yo, you please. Anyone can take this in any direction, please.
I was just gonna ask Jason, because you're an artist, and so to me it blows my mind that the same artist could create those two images. I mean, what do you think about? Is it common for artists and their I don't know what else to call it. Like, if you're a writer, it would be your voice. So your artistic vision, is it common for it to degrade or to completely shift like that? Like, all of Blake's stuff, you see the same forms, essentially. It sort of never changes. That's how he paints. So what does that mean?
Yeah. So I think there's layers to this. There's like the, your spiritual layer with where your inspiration's at, where your what you're seeing that you want to portray or reflect upon. And then there's also just like the practical physical level where after you're doing art for years, it becomes harder and harder to invest the same amount of heart and effort and skill into a piece. In my opinion, in my experience, if I'm doing a piece of art, and I spend 40 hours on a painting or something, and I'm really happy with the painting and everything, then I go to do another painting, and there's almost like a kind of physical burnout where I have an idea, I want to get it down with like the least amount of energy and effort, essentially. So whereas artists, when they're younger, they tend to create very pristine pieces, but as they age, it sort of slopifies in a way. Even though the concepts and ideas are just as interesting, the execution of taking that thing from your muse realm to a physical finished product and is under entropy, right? So that's kind of my take on that, why I think that's the case.
Thanks,
That's
man.
great
That was
insight.
good. Yeah,
That's great.
that's good
Thank you.
insight.
I have a question for you, Jason, actually, since you're an artist. Where do you get your ideas from?
Yeah, so sometimes I'll have an idea come to me where I'm sort of actively thinking about something, and then I have an interesting insight that I think is valuable in a way or unique, and then I'll pursue that to a piece of art. And then there's other times where and this is something I had to intentionally sort of exercise and practice doing, is I'll open up my sketchbook to a blank page, and before I even have any sort of inkling of what I'm going to draw or what shape I'm going to start with or anything, I'll literally just put the pencil or pen or paintbrush or whatever it is to the page, and I'll just create random, meaningless things. And then through the course of seeing what's on the page, now that gives me sort of an anchoring of, oh, okay, well, that kind of looks like a face there, or that kind of looks like a this there. I'll actually now render it to be that thing. And then maybe after you render something to a certain point, then you want to counterpoint that. So then you'll start doing the opposite next to it or something like that, right? And so it just sort of unfolds, like you said earlier, it's like a feedback loop with your own muse in a sense. Like, okay, I set out, I had no real goals or intentions here, but now that I'm 20 minutes into it, now I'm starting to see things develop, and now I'm going to develop those things further.
That's really cool to hear you say that, because that's what I used to do with sketching and stuff. And that reminds me of like how Ray Bradbury would talk about, you know, if you want to be a writer, like write every day, like sit at the typewriter and just start writing, and then you'll end up, you know, sort of developing the routine and also just coming across ideas, you know, through the actual act
Are
of
you
doing
sure you
it.
won't just end up writing all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy?
Yeah, only on Tuesdays.
Exactly. Yeah.
Danny! Danny!
Give me the bat. Give me the bat.
Jason looks famous. Jason looks like the book of people that my heroes when I was there. I'm not trying to say.
He's a king, dude.
Yeah,
king, bro.
Yeah. Yeah, we gotta get you. We gotta get you famous. All right.
That's why you're on my channel today. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mella made me famous.
Yeah, I'm gonna make you
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so do you oops, 1 second. Let me get rid of some.
Can I ask a quick question for the panel?
Right now? There we go. That's what I was trying to say. But yes, please go ahead.
So I'm curious to hear everybody's take on this, because I know just a moment ago we were talking about, you know, certain artists sort of glorifying dark things versus not. And for me, it's sort of, sometimes I can't tell. Sometimes I kind of like, I have to think about that. Sometimes it's intuitive. Like, yes, this seems like, you know, this painter, you know, artist, whatever, is sort of glorifying something dark or evil. What do y'all think about that? Do you think it's something you just kind of go on intuition, or are there certain things you look for? Now, obviously, if you know something about the artist, and that may be a little bit different, but if you're just sort of looking at a painting or, you know, a drawing, a tattoo, like whatever it is, what do y'all think about that?
That's a really great question. You like let me ask you a clarifying question. So, like, you mean to say, Matty, like, how do you tell if like there's actual dark juju to something, basically, or if that's even a thing? Is that the question you're asking?
Well, so like if you look at that painting, like the, you know, the people standing around with the goat with the thing on its head, like the one we're just looking at, if you saw something like that, like a painting or an art or some kind of art, some kind of visual art where it's depicting something dark, it's depicting something evil, is there some kind of criteria, or do you just go off intuition, or how do you discern, is this person celebrating this and promoting it, or is this person depicting something that then they're saying like this is something to be like that's not good?
Right. Yeah.
Can I give my half-baked answer first? I just think that if an artist is coming out with painting after painting after painting after painting of these really dark, like there's no sunlight, there's no God, there's no, I feel like there's a demonic influence there, but that's just me. That's just me.
I think that, yeah, no, I kind of agree with you, Mel, but and I think that you ultimately, Matty, just have to there's really like you have to go off intuition with it. You have to sort of be able to discern it like internally, and not internally. Like I don't really know. I don't know myself what the I don't know. I just know that like I can for myself, like I know that I can kind of like I get a sense sometimes when something's like dark, and I probably shouldn't like I kind of intuitively know, I guess, like I shouldn't be listening to this or this is wrong or something like that. And I don't know. I'm sure maybe there is a science behind it, but if there is, I don't know what it is.
I don't
And
think
I
there's
just
a
know that,
science behind it, but I think you
yeah,
both said it, which is discernment, and I know certainly for like a Christian, the experience of grace and the experience of Christ and Christ's energies, right? Everything else you compare to that, and so like we're told to
yeah.
judge people by their fruits, right? It's like if you can see Christ in a person, right, compared to seeing something that is devoid of those energies or devoid of that grace, like. But it really just does come down to discernment and gut feelings and stuff, which none of us are perfect at. None of us are 100% at it. I mean, I've met people and thought, oh, this is a bad person, and then had that totally flipped on its head and humble me and like, oh, well, maybe I actually am not as good at reading people as I thought, and the inverse too, So there's.
Absolutely. And that's how I felt about William Blake, by the way. I just want to
Mm.
say that.
Yeah. I want to know what Jason thinks.
Yeah. So there. What Matty, I think what you're pointing to is like the ambiguity of imagery and how an image is amoral, right? And only the moral interpretation comes when the viewer is viewing it, and so it's a mirror to you, right? And I appreciate both dark and light art, really, because both sort of point to the same overarching reality that we're in, right? So even if a piece is dark or offensive or whatever it may be, there's still things I can appreciate about it, even if I don't endorse the message or whatever I'm getting from it, right? So I think that's kind of what you're pointing to, is like there's like an ambiguity to a lot of art. And that can be fun as well, right? Like you can put your own spins on things. Like, for example, if there was a painting of like an obvious demon like stomping a saint or something, that is obviously a demonic message to the painting. But if you were to come to it blank and just see this hideous horned figure stomping on like a pristine figure, that could speak to other aspects of reality that maybe every one of us has experienced. Like maybe some of us have been down in the dumps before, and that demonic figure sort of portrays how we felt at that moment, and maybe the pristine figure portrays like the coddled society that rejected us or something. So you can see there's like value in perceiving these things, and that's what's fun about art, really, is at the end of the day, you're the viewer, you're the one deciding sort of what it means to you, right? So
Well said.
Awesome.
I think that modern art, there are examples of modern art and contemporary, sort of mid modern art, which would be getting into the contemporary era of people like, not the old Francis Bacon, but the new Francis Bacon, the Englishman, who paints screaming faces in blood. And that to me is, I see the painting and I can smell the blood coming from the painting. That has an evil residue to it. It's like a curse. That's a cursed painting. And then there are other criteria, not non-scientific, because we're talking about ultimately a sort of subjective vision, but something like Plato's criteria, which is truth, beauty, and goodness, or the possibility of virtue, or or discernment and contrast, juxtaposition in art. I mean, if you look at something like Milton's Paradise Lost, or at Macbeth, and you take away the intention, never sort of factors into it for me, because I don't know what the intention of the person was. All I know is the product. And whether we know anything about the artist who created it, or the poet or the painter, there's a resolution that's involved. If we look at a painting, like if we look at a Jackson Pollock painting, to me, Jackson Pollock paintings are more twisted and evil than overtly evil, cursed paintings, in a way, because the paintings are saying that everything is chaos. It's just chaos and how you feel about nothingness. And that to me is worse than if you look at paintings like even if you look at a Jean-Michel Basquiat painting, which a lot of people hate, and we see sort of figures as skulls and we see words splotched. I mean, there's a lot of chaos, but there's still the possibility of redemption to me when I look at those paintings.
I always liked Basquiat. I thought that was cool, man.
Yeah, I've always liked Basquiat, and there's a kind of Haitian voodoo thing mixed into it, even though he would hate that because he hated the idea of his paintings being called primitive. But they are. There is a sort of primitive, and that doesn't have to be racial or anything. It's just a primitive spirit that happens in a painting, and how that's supposed to contrast with the modern world. If I read Paradise Lost or Macbeth and I didn't know anything else, I would go, wow, these are about demons and witches and Satan is the hero. But the point is that at the very beginning of Paradise Lost, first of all, it's Paradise Lost. There's still a paradise. And at the beginning of the poem, the demons are in a state of blackened chaos, and they're looking up, and they recognize in book 1 that they've been defeated. So their only purpose, as stated, is to subvert and pervert God's order. And so that shows you that God has an order. Anything order is God's order. And like Jason was saying, like, you can't look at a thing. The thing itself doesn't seem to have a morality to it, especially we don't get our morality from.
I would like to ask Jason a question on that, because I would normally, like, I when you said that, I totally agree with you. But then I think about the paintings that the Podestas had, right? Like something like is that an amoral image? You know.
So good point, Jerry. I'm glad you brought that. Was actually a thought I had, and I forgot to bring that up. Because when Matty asked this question, the first thing my mind went to was the Podestas art collection. Yes, those would be an example of clear anti-human, anti-beauty,
anti-innocence.
Yes. Vile, intentionally vile, right? An embrace of darkness. Yes, I'd agree with that for sure.
Can I say something? I mean, I totally agree with what you guys are saying, but I admit I am biased by Father Seraphim Rose's Orthodox Survival Course of seeing, history and the spirit of the Antichrist moving in history, and so that's why it strikes me to see all these dark, nocturnal, like satanic, demonic paintings coming from the late 1700s and the early 1800s. And then what happens in the 1800s? We get, and after that, we get Nietzsche, and we get war, and we get like crazy, like just nihilism. And everything seems to be like downstream from this signpost of the Romantic era, which is the response to the Enlightenment. Am I way off base on that?
Well, Nietzsche in the 19th century also stands as a reaction to what became globalism of the 19th century. So realpolitik and colonialism begins as a way to try and make order of the world. At least that's what they say. And that's what we see in global domination and resources, but also a kind of like a quasi-Roman thing of going to the savage place, the wilderness, and making it ordered. But the reaction to that ends up with the same sort of reaction that Romanticism has to the neoclassical era, because in the fallen world, the best of good intentions can lead to the darkest things, because of all the factors involved and all the people involved. And so I think it's natural in the sort of course of human existence for that to sort of happen.
Mella, I'm gonna have to dip out soon because I'm getting rained on. It's like pouring right now, and on this porch, like the umbrella only works so much. So I'm getting pretty soaked.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank
It's
you
okay.
so much. It was
Thank
so
you so
awesome
much
to
for
have
having
you.
me. This is fun, and it's been great to get to see John Connor's beautiful face for the first time, and have Jason Scholl on the freaking stream, dude. That's awesome. You got to do this more. You're really insightful, and it's really good
Yeah.
to hear your takes, especially coming from such a talented artist and stuff. You know, I always love seeing your tattoos and stuff. So keep at it, man, and definitely we want to hear more from you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Mella, and God bless. And I really hope that you keep it up with the channel, and I'll be subscribed and checking it out.
Thank you.
All right, peace out, y'all.
Thank
Peace,
you.
bro.
Okay. Well, before you all leave me, can I just show one more artist here? Do you guys
Bruegel.
know? Are you guys familiar with this one?
Yeah, this is
Tower of Babel.
Bruegel
Yeah.
the Elder. Yeah.
So I don't
Punish.
want to say too much, but I just want you guys to look at it and tell me what you guys think. If you have anything to say about a certain painting, just feel free. I showed this in our chat before. This just seems like, and I like this term. I'm stealing it from someone else. This is anthropological pessimism to me. This is the blind leading the blind. And Bruegel's kind of known for that, but I don't want to say anymore.
Didn't Bruegel have that one piece of like it's like the famous piece of the Dutch Renaissance where it's the
Fall of Icarus.
No, not
Yeah,
that one.
that's true. That's
But
true.
that's not the one I'm thinking of though. I'm thinking of the one where it's like above the town, and it's like a really good example of like the horizon line. You know, it's like a town in the winter and there's kids ice
The
skating in it.
skaters. Yeah, the ice
Oh
skaters.
yes,
The ice skaters, yeah. Is that Bruegel or is that someone
I
else?
think
Yeah, that's
I think that is
Bruegel also.
Bruegel. Yeah, he
okay.
was a follower of Hieronymus Bosch. And do you guys okay, so look at this one. This is the procession to Calvary. This one, what was his name? The guy who I'm blanking, I'm so sorry. But the guy who wrote oh my god, I'm so sorry, I'm totally blanking. His brother was like the UNICEF guy. Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley was the one who was like, yo, this painting is super like nefarious. And I don't know if you guys can kind of see why, but this is the procession to Calvary. And
It's hard to tell.
It's hard to tell. Yeah, you really have to like zoom in on stuff, but I don't know if you guys can see Christ at all.
No,
I mean,
you
the
can't.
procession to Calvary is about Christ, but you could barely see him. He's just in the middle there. And in the foreground, you see a lot more just people being crazy and foolish and retarded, basically, because that's that pessimism, right? And then
There's a scene in a book I cover called Underworld by Don DeLeo.
yeah,
Mella, where
yes.
the triumph of death is plays one of the major roles in it. And at the beginning of the book, the triumph of death is in a Time magazine, and it gets cut out of the magazine. And J. Edgar Hoover is at a baseball game, famous Yankees baseball game, and the cutout gets blown in the wind and blows into his face, and he can't stop looking at the painting rather than looking at the baseball game in front of him. And it leads to themes in the book about nuclear waste and what happens with waste. But yeah, you're right. Bruegel is an interesting. I went to the Bruegel Museum in Europe, and Bruegel also is like you said, it's a very Hieronymus Bosch like. Hieronymus Bosch has seen his famous triptych with Purgatory and Hell. That's right. Yeah. What's it called again?
The Garden of Earthly Delights.
That's right. Yes. John Connor. And the people look, whenever you have paintings with massive landscapes, especially with death, and the people are very small, people's natural interpretation is that human life is cheap, and that death, like look at this painting, death and destruction sort of conquers over people, and our dastardly deeds, show our sort of unimportance in the universe, according to this artist's vision. The Fall of Icarus is another one of his famous paintings, which has a poem by W.H. Auden, a great poem by W.H. Auden, which is basically that you see Daedalus in the sky, and in the background you see the legs of his son drowning, and people just kind of keep on passing by as if life is unimportant.
Yeah.
But that seems to come out of this all sort of comes out of how life became cheapened during the Middle Ages with the plague. And even though the plague doesn't look like it's portrayed here, we get that sort of, just as in Babel and in Gilgamesh, everybody is affected into their DNA by the flood. The Black Plague seemed to do the same thing to the people in the Middle Ages.
Yeah, no, one thing with a lot of this is, Mella, when you asked earlier about, I think the question was something like, why would people incorporate or would do religious art that's not like in a reverent kind of way? And I think it's interesting because I was thinking about this, and I think it speaks to just how deeply ingrained into the cultures that where Christianity exists and is sort of the dominant religion, is you see the imagery continually showing up. And when that question came up earlier, I immediately thought there's a band from England called Godflesh, who are not a Christian band by any means, but they use a lot of Christian imagery in their artwork. And something that their singer and guitarist talked about in an interview was that he was sort of intimidated and kind of scared by these sort of like massive, like when you walk into a massive cathedral, and I think the word he used to describe it all was obsessive, which I don't exactly know what he meant by that, but I think it speaks to that there's something there that appeals to people, whether it's hopefully we hope it's in the right way, but in some cases maybe in the wrong way. But I mean, even in a country like England, which has been pretty solidly atheist for quite some time now, how there's still not for everybody, but I think especially for artistic and creative type of people, there is this sort of inability to escape it. And so even if they're not using it for reverent purposes, there's something there that has an impact on people.
That's a great point, Matty. I don't understand why this is the case, but there are people that are just more sensitive to the spiritual things than others are. And I don't really know why that is. I don't know how that makes sense. I've seen it. At least that's what it seems to be. It could just be these people are oppressed by spirits also. That could be the case. I don't know. But artists are more likely to see these things, and artists are typically the ones that are the more sensitive ones. When you are not spiritually healthy, again, not only is it a reflection of the culture at large, but it is also a reflection of the person themselves, So I think I mentioned this on a stream before. My godfather's an iconographer. Like we were talking about that in the last stream also, about how like you have to be in a state of prayer to make icons, because if you don't, you might not even be able to see it, but like other iconographers can see it. They're just like, there's something wrong with your icons, basically, and that they're no good. And he's shown me pictures before of people that he knows where they were like living a sinful life, and he's like, I know you can't see it because you don't see what I see with this. You don't see the form and of the thing that I see. He's like, but I can tell just by the looks of this icon that like the person who made it was in a very deep spiritual like chasm, essentially, and that he shouldn't have been making it in the first place, or he should have repented prior to it. And so the thing is that like you look at this, you see these sorts of things, and like, yeah, it's to basically build off what you guys have been saying. It's like this is the mirror, like BLA was talking about. It's a mirror. It's not only a mirror of society. It's in some sense it's the mirror of the heart of the person, which is not only informed by their own spiritual state, but by the culture, the milieu that they live in at large, and when the falling away takes place, when you look at a society that has fallen away so far, it's like, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, I suppose, you get dross from dross, yeah.
Yeah, good points.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is, you know, as far as I understand it.
Is that a line of cocaine on the table too?
Yeah,
Yep.
Nice.
looks like it.
See what I mean? Dross from dross.
And also, I was going to say too, like, you know, we've been describing it as sort of a mirror as far as, you know, what these paintings are when you're viewing them and you're sort of thinking about how it makes you feel. But there's also an aspect of these works where they're windows, right? You're looking out into this window and the artist is sort of saying, hey, look out that window there. Look at this crazy thing, or look at this epic thing, or whatever it is, or look at this beautiful thing. And with artists, you know, I think we like to capture the provocative, whether it's beautifully provocative or ugly provocative, because art is to be engaged with, and it's almost like most art, in my opinion, from this era that Mella that you've been talking about, I don't think these artists are necessarily creating these products like, oh, look at our enlightenment, isn't it great, isn't it dark, aren't we proud? I think it's more of a criticism. I think they're looking out at the world, and they're taking these window snapshots, and they're showing like, wow, look at this chaos, look at this darkness, look at what we've done, what we're living through. So I just wanted to bring up that aspect.
No, I totally agree with you on that, Jason. For sure. Well, guys, that's all I had. I don't have any more art to show, and I'm all out of comments. But is there anything else you guys want to talk about? I mean, I'm all for it.
No, this was awesome.
Sounds like a no.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here. This was a lot of fun. I'm so glad that we got deep into this stuff. I wanted to get into some really demonic stuff, but that comes much later on. And so there was just so much to see already in this point of, you know, history. So, you know, maybe in the future we can get into some other things. But any last words or conclusions or anything else you guys want to say?
I'll end it here. Hey, thanks for having me on here, Mella. Great channel. Everybody make sure you're subscribed. Thank you, Real John Connor. Thanks, Jerry. Thanks, Matty. Thanks, Jason, especially for being here. Jason, great to see you. And everybody, please come to I plan on doing it tomorrow night. My second part of the Narnia series I'm doing tomorrow night is on The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and on parts of C.S. Lewis. I'll be doing all the Narnia series. It actually taps into this a lot. C.S. Lewis discusses a lot of this in terms of his personal writing, and then that sort of fits into his vision of Narnia. So if everybody can stop by. Thanks again for having me. I love you guys. Thanks for everybody who's in the chat. Everybody who's here. Make sure you hit the like button. Share this stream out.
Please do that. Any last words on John, Matty, Jason?
Yes, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. I wish my computer would have cooperated. I wouldn't have technical difficulties, but that's all right. Yeah, the stream is definitely, just like the last one, has given me a lot to think about. It's been really great talking to everybody. And like I've said before, anytime you want me on one of these, let me know, and I would be happy to come back anytime.
You're always invited. How about you, Jason?
Yes, thank you for making me famous, Mella. Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. I really don't do content creation of any kind, but if people want to connect on Instagram, I'm under JSN Scholl. That's JSNSCHOLL. And other than that, great panel, great discussion. I had a lot of fun. It was awesome to finally be on here with you guys, so I appreciate that.
And Jason, I want to have you on the next panel. We're going to do another, well, I guess this one was an art panel, but we're going to do another art panel. So hopefully you can come on.
Oh, cool. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And John, any last words?
No, just, well, actually one, it's like, Jason, I didn't realize. I thought that you knew. I remember earlier when I asked you where you got your ideas from. That was a Norm joke, and I thought you knew that Norm joke, and so that's why I asked that in the first place. So, like, I didn't like. I'm glad you actually gave an answer. I didn't want to stop you because I didn't want to be like, I don't really care where your ideas come from. Like, don't tell me that. But like, yeah, that
Right.
was.
I gave a profound answer, which was
You actually really, yeah, exactly. So I had to stop myself, but I was like, yeah. So thank you for being ready with a profound answer. I guess with as every answer you gave tonight was very really insightful and wonderful. So yeah, we'll have you on again.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Really awesome.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that I hope that John and I in the near future can do a little review of The Name of the Rose. And I also just want to thank BLA because, you know, John and I, we have done a few film analyses already. And I don't think we would have been able to do that without watching years of your content. So thank you so much for kind of showing us the ropes a little bit. And yeah, it's been so much fun. And I love this community. I think it's amazing. And yeah, I love all you guys. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to do this. And I hope we can do it again in the future. All right. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
See you guys.